The rain had started 3 days ago and hadn't stopped since. It drummed against the small cabin's roof with a persistence that matched my growing unease, each drop a reminder that winter was coming early this year. I stood by the window, watching the forest beyond blur into shades of gray and green, my reflection a pale ghost in the glass. My blonde hair hung limp around my shoulders, and the dark circles under my eyes told the story of too many sleepless nights. 23 years old, and I was still here, still alone, still invisible. The village below was preparing for the harvest moon gathering, the one night a year when everyone came together to celebrate the bounty and pray for protection through the cold months ahead. I could hear the distant sounds of preparation even from up here on the hill. Laughter, music, the clatter of tables being set up in the town square. Once I had been part of that. Once I had belonged. That was before. I turned away from the window, my fingers unconsciously moving to the scar on my left forearm. It had faded over the past 2 years, but I could still feel the raised tissue beneath my sleeve, still remember the night everything changed. The night I chose compassion over common sense, and lost everything because of it. The cabin felt smaller every day. My father had built it as a hunting lodge, back when he was still alive. Back when my mother's smile was something other than a distant memory. Now it was just me and the silence, broken only by the rain and the occasional creak of settling wood. The villagers avoided this place. They avoided me. Witch touched, they called me. Wolf lover. Cursed. All because I had saved a life. I moved to the small kitchen, my bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and I knelt to add more wood, watching the flames catch and grow. The warmth felt good against my skin, but it couldn't touch the coldness that had settled inside me over the past 2 years. 2 years since that night, 2 years since I had found him. I closed my eyes, and the memory came flooding back as vivid as if it were yesterday. The snow had been falling thick and fast, unusual for early autumn, but not unheard of in these mountains. I had been gathering late-season herbs in the deep woods, the places where no one else dared to go, when I heard it. A sound so full of pain and desperation that it stopped me in my tracks. A wolf. Dying. Common sense said to run. The wolves in these mountains were dangerous, territorial, and they had no love for humans. But something in that sound called to me, pulled at something deep in my chest that I didn't understand. I had followed it through the trees, my lantern swinging wildly in my shaking hand, until I found him. Even dying, he was magnificent. His fur was dark as midnight, thick and luxurious, despite the blood that matted it. He lay in a small clearing, his breathing labored, his golden eyes watching me with an intensity that should have terrified me. A hunter's trap had caught his hind leg, the iron teeth buried deep in flesh and bone. But worse than that were the arrow wounds, 3 of them, clustered around his shoulder and chest. Someone had hunted him deliberately, tried to kill him and failed. I should have left him, should have turned around and pretended I had never seen anything. The village had strict rules about wolves, about interfering with the natural order of things. But those eyes, there was something in those golden eyes that looked almost human, almost pleading. "I'm going to help you," I had whispered, setting down my lantern and approaching slowly. "Please don't bite me." The wolf had made a sound low in his throat. Not quite a growl, not quite a whimper. His body tensed as I knelt beside him, my hands trembling as I examined the trap. The mechanism was complex, designed to hold without killing immediately. Cruel. It had taken me nearly an hour to free him, working by lantern light while the snow continued to fall. The wolf had remained eerily still, those golden eyes never leaving my face. When the trap finally released, he let out a sound that might have been relief, or might have been pain. I couldn't tell. The arrows were next, and I worked as carefully as I could, remembering the lessons my mother had taught me before she died. How to clean wounds, how to stitch flesh, how to use the herbs that grew in the deep woods. The wolf had watched me through it all, his breathing growing steadier as I worked. When I finally finished, wrapping his wounds with strips torn from my own cloak, he had done something that still haunted my dreams. He had lifted his massive head and touched his nose to my hand, just once. so gently it might have been my imagination. Then he had struggled to his feet and limped away into the darkness, leaving me alone in the clearing with my bloody hands and my racing heart. I had thought that was the end of it. Thought I could go home, wash the blood away, and never speak of what I had done. But someone had seen me. One of the hunters, coming back to check his trap, had spotted my lantern in the woods. By morning, the whole village knew that I had saved a wolf, a monster, an enemy. The accusations had started immediately. Witch, demon lover, cursed. My small cottage in the village had been vandalized, words painted across the door in red that looked too much like blood. The baker refused to sell me bread. The well-keeper told me to find my own water. One by one, the people I had known my entire life turned their backs on me. So I had come here, to my father's old hunting cabin, and I had stayed. 2 years of isolation, 2 years of silence, 2 years of wondering if I had made the right choice that night in the snow. The knock at the door shattered my reverie. I froze, my heart suddenly pounding. No one came up here. No one had knocked on my door in 2 years. The rain continued its relentless drumming, and for a moment, I thought I had imagined it. Then it came again. 3 sharp knocks, deliberate and commanding. I stood slowly, my legs unsteady beneath me. Through the small window beside the door, I could see a figure standing on my porch, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing that seemed to absorb the gray light of the rainy afternoon. Not someone from the village. The villagers were shorter, rounder, softer. This person stood like a soldier, like someone accustomed to being obeyed. My hand shook as I reached for the door handle. Every instinct screamed at me to stay silent, to pretend I wasn't home, but something else. That same something that had pulled me toward a dying wolf 2 years ago made me turn the handle and pull the door open. The man on my porch was stunning in a way that made my breath catch. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with strong features that looked carved from stone. His hair was dark, almost black, and wet from the rain. But it was his eyes that stopped me cold. Golden eyes. The exact shade of amber I had seen in the dying wolf's gaze 2 years ago. Impossible. "Elena," he said, and his voice was deep, resonant, carrying an authority that made me want to step back and bow at the same time. "We need to talk." I stared at him, my mind racing. I had never told anyone my name. After I moved to the cabin, I had become simply the girl on the hill, the witch-touched one. No one had called me by my name in 2 years. "Who are you?" I managed to whisper. His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You saved my life once. I've come to return the favor." The world tilted beneath my feet. Those eyes, that voice, the way he stood with controlled power despite the rain soaking through his clothes. It couldn't be. Wolves didn't become men. That was a fairy tale nonsense. Stories told to frighten children. But those eyes, "I don't understand," I said, and my voice sounded small and frightened even to my own ears. He took a step closer, and I could smell him now, pine and rain and something wild that made my pulse quicken. "The harvest moon gathering begins tonight. The village elders have decided you're the cause of this early winter. They're coming for you at sunset." His golden eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. "They're bringing fire." The word hung in the air between us like a death sentence. Fire. The traditional punishment for witches, for anyone deemed cursed or demon-touched. "Why?" I breathed, though I already knew the answer. I had always been different, always been alone. Saving the wolf had just given them the excuse they needed, because people fear what they don't understand, he said quietly. And because someone has been whispering poison in their ears, telling them that their crops are failing because you cursed the land, that the early frost is your punishment upon them. That's insane. I'm not a witch. I can't control the weather. I know. He paused, and something in his expression shifted, became almost vulnerable. "I've been watching over you, Elena. For 2 years, I've made sure the wolves left you alone, that no hunter accidentally wandered too close to your cabin, but I can't protect you from an entire village. Not without revealing what I am." My mind struggled to process his words. A shifter. He was a shifter. The legends were true, and he had been watching me, protecting me, all this time. "What do you want from me?" I asked, because there had to be a reason he was here now, telling me this. His golden eyes seemed to glow in the dim light of the rainy afternoon. "Come with me. My pack can offer you protection, a place to belong. You saved my life when you had every reason to leave me to die. Let me save yours." I looked past him at the rain-soaked forest, then back at the small cabin that had been my prison for 2 years. Behind him, down in the valley, I could almost see the village preparing for the gathering, preparing to come for me. A choice. Stay and face the fire, or go with a stranger, a wolf, into the unknown. My fingers found the scar on my arm again, tracing the old wound. 2 years ago, I had chosen compassion over safety. It had cost me everything I knew, but standing here, looking into those golden eyes, I realized something. I was still alive, still standing, still capable of choosing my own path. "If I come with you," I said slowly, "what happens then?" His expression was unreadable. "Then you'll discover that the world is much larger than this village, and perhaps—" He hesitated, and for just a moment, the powerful Alpha looked almost uncertain. "Perhaps you'll understand why I couldn't stop thinking about the girl with gentle hands and a brave heart who chose to save a monster in the snow." The rain continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, I heard the first toll of the village bell. Sunset was 3 hours away. I took a breath and made my choice. I'll need to pack. He waited on the porch while I gathered my things, his presence a solid, protective shadow against the storm. I moved through the cabin in a daze, pulling my mother's old traveling bag from beneath the bed and filling it with what little I owned. Clothes, mostly worn and patched. A few books my father had left behind. The small wooden box that held my herbs and remedies. My hands shook as I worked, my mind still struggling to accept what was happening. Shifters were real. The man on my porch, the wolf I had saved, was proof of that. And he had been watching me for 2 years. I paused, holding one of my father's books, and let that sink in. 2 years. While I had been alone, isolated, believing myself abandoned by the entire world, someone had been there, protecting me from the shadows. The thought sent a strange warmth through my chest, followed immediately by a spike of fear. What did he want? Why had he really come? Elena. His voice came from the doorway, and I turned to find him standing just inside, water dripping from his dark hair onto my floor. "We don't have much time. The council will meet within the hour, and once they vote, the hunters will come." "I'm almost ready," I said, forcing my hands to steady as I closed the bag. "I just need to—" "Leave it all," he interrupted, his golden eyes sweeping across the sparse cabin. "None of this matters where we're going." Something in his tone made me bristle. "These are my things, my father's things. They matter to me." For a moment we stood in silence, the rain drumming overhead. Then, surprisingly, his expression softened. "Forgive me. I'm used to giving orders and having them followed without question. Pack what you need, but be quick." I nodded and returned to my task, hyper-aware of his presence in the small space. He moved with an economy of motion that spoke of controlled power, examining the cabin with an intensity that made me wonder what he saw. Did he judge me for the threadbare curtains, the simple furniture, the life I had carved out in isolation? "Why didn't you tell me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. 2 years ago, after I helped you, why didn't you let me know what you were? He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "Because I was afraid." I turned to stare at him. "Afraid? Of what?" "Of what you represented." He moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked forest. "I'm the Alpha King, Elena. I lead not just one pack, but several. I'm responsible for hundreds of lives, for maintaining the treaties that keep us hidden from human knowledge, for protecting my kind from exposure. And in one night, a human girl with blonde hair and fearless hands made me question everything. My heart was pounding now. "I don't understand." He turned to face me, and the raw honesty in his expression took my breath away. "You should have left me to die." It would have been the smart choice, the safe choice. But you didn't. You risked everything to save a creature you'd been taught to fear. You saw me, truly saw me, and chose compassion. He paused, his jaw tightening. Do you know how rare that is? How precious? I couldn't speak, couldn't move. The weight of his words pressed against my chest like a physical thing. I watched you pay the price for that choice, he continued, his voice dropping lower. I watched the village turn against you. Watched you retreat to this cabin and survive alone. I wanted to reveal myself 1,000 times. Wanted to tell you that you weren't alone, that someone understood. But I couldn't. Because the moment I did, I would put my entire pack at risk. Then why now? I whispered. Why risk it now? His golden eyes blazed with an intensity that made my knees weak. Because they're going to kill you, Elena. And I've discovered that there are some things more important than treaties and secrecy, some debts that can never be repaid. He took a step closer, and I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You saved my life. Let me save yours. Let me show you a world where compassion isn't punished, where your gentle heart is valued instead of feared. The cabin suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. I grabbed my bag and slung it over my shoulder, needing to move, to do something other than stand there drowning in the golden fire of his gaze. I'm ready, I said, my voice barely steady. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. It's a 3-hour run to the pack territory. Can you ride? I blinked. Ride what? A smile ghosted across his lips. The first real smile I'd seen from him. Hold that thought. He stepped out onto the porch, and I followed, pulling my cloak tight against the rain. The afternoon had grown darker, the clouds thick and heavy overhead. In the distance, I could see the first lights beginning to glow in the village below. They would be gathering soon, working themselves into righteous fury. Close your eyes, he said. What? Why? Because the first time is always shocking, and I'd rather you didn't faint. There was amusement in his voice now, warm and unexpected. I closed my eyes, my heart racing. I heard the rustle of fabric, felt the air shift around me, then came a sound unlike anything I'd ever heard. Not quite a crack, not quite a rush of wind, but something in between. The temperature around me spiked, and the scent of pine and wild things grew stronger. You can look now. I opened my eyes and my breath caught. Where the man had stood, there was now a wolf, but not just any wolf, the wolf. The same massive creature I had found dying in the snow, but healed now, whole, magnificent in his prime. His midnight fur gleamed even in the rain, and those golden eyes watched me with an intelligence that was unmistakably human. You're beautiful, I breathed, and then immediately felt foolish for saying it. The wolf made a sound that might have been a laugh. He lowered himself to the ground, his body language clearly indicating I should climb on. I stared. You want me to ride you? He huffed impatiently, and I couldn't help the nervous laugh that escaped. 2 hours ago, I had been alone in my cabin, resigned to my isolation. Now I was about to ride a shifter wolf through a thunderstorm to escape being burned alive. My life had taken a decidedly strange turn. I approached slowly, running my hand along his side. His fur was thick and soft, warmer than I expected. I could feel the powerful muscles beneath, the controlled strength. Carefully, I climbed onto his back, gripping his fur and pressing my bag against my chest. The moment I was settled, he rose in one fluid motion and launched into a run. The world became a blur of rain and trees and speed. I pressed myself flat against his back, my face buried in his fur, my heart in my throat. He moved with impossible grace, his paws barely seeming to touch the ground as he wove through the forest. The rain pelted us, but his body heat kept me warm, and gradually my terror transformed into something else: exhilaration, freedom. I had spent 2 years confined to that small cabin, barely venturing beyond its walls. Now I was flying through the forest on the back of a creature from legend, leaving my prison behind. A laugh bubbled up in my chest, wild and unexpected. The wolf's pace didn't slow, but I felt something shift in the way he moved, as if he could sense my change in mood. We ran for what felt like hours, climbing higher into the mountains where the trees grew thick and ancient. The rain began to ease, and through the canopy, I caught glimpses of the sky turning from gray to deep purple. Sunset was coming. Finally, the wolf began to slow. We emerged into a clearing, and I lifted my head to look around. We stood at the edge of a valley, and below us, hidden among the trees and rocks, I could see structures. Not crude dens or caves, but actual buildings. Cabins and lodges built with care and skill, smoke rising from chimneys. Warm light glowed from windows, and I could hear voices, laughter, the sounds of life. The wolf lowered himself, allowing me to slide off. My legs trembled, weak from the long ride and the adrenaline still coursing through my system. I took a few unsteady steps, staring down at the hidden village below. "A pack," I whispered, "a whole pack." The air shimmered beside me, and then he was there again, the man, dressed once more, despite having left his clothes on my porch. I didn't question it. My capacity for shock had been thoroughly exhausted. "Welcome to Thornridge," he said, his voice rough from the shift. "My home. And yours, if you choose to accept it." I turned to look at him, really look at him. His dark hair was still wet, plastered to his head. His strong features were set in an expression of carefully controlled neutrality, but his golden eyes betrayed him. There was hope there, and uncertainty, and something deeper I was afraid to name. "You still haven't told me your name," I said. A shadow of a smile crossed his face. "Dane. My name is Dane Thornridge, Alpha King of the Northern Packs." "Dane," I repeated, tasting the name. It felt right, solid and strong like the man himself. "Come," he said, gesturing down the slope. "The pack will want to meet you, and we need to get you warm and dry before—" He stopped abruptly, his head snapping to the side. His entire body went rigid, his nostrils flaring as he scented the air. In an instant, the controlled, civilized man vanished, replaced by something feral and dangerous. "What is it?" I asked, fear spiking through me. "Hunters." The word was a growl. "They followed us. They must have been watching your cabin, waiting." My blood ran cold. "How many?" "6. Maybe more." He turned to me, his expression fierce. "Can you make it down the slope alone?" Yes, I think so." "Go, now. Find a woman named Sarah. She has silver hair and will be in the largest lodge. Tell her Dane sent you and that hunters are close. She'll protect you." "What about you?" His smile was all teeth, nothing human about it. "I'm going to make sure they regret following us." Before I could protest, he was shifting again, the wolf emerging in a ripple of power and heat. He turned and bounded back into the forest, toward the pursuing hunters, leaving me alone at the edge of the valley. I stood frozen for a heartbeat, torn between the instinct to run and the desperate urge to follow him, to make sure he was safe. But I was human, weak, useless in a fight. The best thing I could do was get to safety and not become a liability. I started down the slope, my bag clutched tight, my eyes searching for the largest lodge. Behind me, deep in the forest, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze, a wolf's howl, savage and challenging, followed by human screams. Dane was fighting because of me, because he had chosen to save me. I ran faster. The largest lodge sat at the heart of the village, its windows glowing with warm amber light that cut through the gathering dusk. I stumbled toward it, my breath coming in ragged gasps, my legs burning from the desperate sprint down the slope. Around me, I could sense movement, figures emerging from doorways, curious eyes tracking my progress. The air smelled of wood smoke and something cooking, making my empty stomach clench with hunger. I'd been too anxious to notice before. I reached the lodge's heavy wooden door and pounded on it with my fist. Probably harder than necessary. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I couldn't stop looking back toward the forest where Dane had disappeared. No more sounds came from that direction. No howls, no screams, just silence, which somehow felt worse. The door swung open, revealing a woman who took my breath away. She was tall, nearly as tall as Dane, with silver hair that cascaded past her shoulders, despite a face that looked no older than 30. Her eyes were a pale blue, almost white, and they held a sharpness that told me she missed nothing. "Please," I gasped. "Dane sent me, hunters. They followed us." He said to find Sarah. Her expression shifted from curiosity to steel in an instant. "Inside. Now." She grabbed my arm and pulled me through the doorway, then called over her shoulder. "Garrett, Rowan, hunters in the North Woods. Rally the patrol." The interior of the lodge was larger than I expected, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall and sturdy furniture arranged around it. Several people occupied the space. A man sharpening a blade near the fire, 2 women sorting herbs at a long table, a teenage boy reading in the corner. All of them looked up at Sarah's command, their bodies going tense and alert. "How many?" the man by the fire asked, rising to his feet. He was broad-shouldered and scarred, with brown hair shot through with gray. 6, maybe more," I said, finding my voice. "Dane went to—" "Of course he did," Sarah muttered, but there was affection beneath the exasperation. "That fool never could resist a fight." She turned to the man. "Garrett, take Rowan and Marcus. Find our alpha and make sure he doesn't do anything stupidly heroic." Garrett nodded and moved toward the door, pausing only to grab a cloak from a hook. "What about the girl?" "She stays with me." Sarah's hand was still on my arm, firm but not painful. "If hunters followed her here, they know what she is to Dane. That makes her pack business. What I am to Dane." I wanted to ask what she meant, but the men were already moving, transforming mid-stride in that same impossible ripple of power I'd witnessed before. 3 wolves. 1 brown, 1 reddish gold, 1 gray, burst through the door and vanished into the twilight. Sarah closed the door behind them and turned to me, her pale eyes assessing. "Sit. You look like you're about to collapse." And she was right. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me shaky and weak. I sank into a chair near the fire, my wet cloak steaming in the heat. One of the women brought me a blanket without being asked, draping it around my shoulders with a gentle smile. "I'm Beth," she said softly. She was younger than me, maybe 19, with warm brown eyes and freckles scattered across her nose. "Don't worry. Dane's the strongest alpha in 3 generations. A few human hunters are nothing." I wanted to believe her, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. "He saved me. They were coming to burn me, and he—" "We know," Sarah interrupted, settling into the chair across from me. "We've known about you for 2 years, Elena. The human girl who saved our king." I stared at her. "You knew?" "Dane told us everything after it happened. How you found him dying in that trap, how you freed him and tended his wounds despite the danger." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "He wanted to bring you here immediately, but the council forbade it. Too risky, they said. Humans and shifters don't mix. It always ends in tragedy. But I'm here now," I said quietly. "You're here now because our king decided that some rules are worth breaking." She leaned forward, her pale eyes intense. "Do you understand what you've walked into, Elena? This isn't just a pack. This is the seat of power for all the northern territories. The decisions made here affect hundreds of shifters across 3 mountain ranges. And you, a human, are now under the protection of the Alpha King himself." The weight of her words settled over me like a physical thing. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to help someone who was suffering. "I know." Sarah's voice gentled. "That's what makes this so complicated. You didn't save Dane for political gain or personal advantage. You did it because you have a good heart. And that's exactly why the council is going to lose their minds when they find out you're here." Before I could respond, the door burst open. Dane strode in, human again, with Garrett and the others behind him. There was blood on his hands, not his own, I thought, and his expression was grim. His golden eyes found me immediately, scanning me from head to toe as if checking for injuries. "You're safe," he said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "The hunters?" I asked. "Dealt with." His jaw tightened. "They won't be reporting back to the village, and they won't be hunting anyone ever again." I should have felt horror at the implication, but all I felt was a strange numbness. Those men had been coming to burn me alive. Whatever Dane had done to them, they had earned. "We need to convene the council," Garrett said, his voice heavy. "The treaty." "Damn the treaty," Dane snapped. "They broke it first when they came onto Packlands with weapons and hostile intent." "They were chasing a human, not hunting shifters," Sarah pointed out. Technically, she's under my protection now, which makes her an attack on this pack." Dane's voice held an edge of command that made everyone in the room straighten unconsciously. "Anyone who wants to argue that point can take it up with me directly." Silence fell. I watched the others exchange glances, saw the mixture of concern and resignation on their faces. This was costing him something, I realized. Protecting me was putting him at odds with his own people. "Dane," I said quietly, and his attention snapped to me. "Maybe this was a mistake. I don't want to cause problems for your pack. I can leave, find somewhere else." "No." The word was absolute. He crossed the room and knelt in front of my chair, bringing his eyes level with mine. Up close, I could see the gold flecks in his irises, the way they seemed to catch and hold the firelight. "You're not going anywhere, not unless you choose to leave freely. And even then, I'll make sure you have somewhere safe to go." His hand reached out, hesitating just before touching my face. "I failed to protect you once. I won't make that mistake again." My breath caught. "You didn't fail. You couldn't have. I watched you suffer alone for 2 years because I was too afraid to break the rules." His voice was raw with an emotion I couldn't name. I told myself I was being responsible, protecting my pack. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was afraid of what it meant that I couldn't stop thinking about you. Couldn't let you go. The room was completely silent now. I was aware of the others watching us, but I couldn't tear my gaze away from Dane's face. This powerful Alpha King, this man who commanded hundreds, was kneeling before me with his heart laid bare. "Why?" I whispered. "Why can't you let me go?" His hand finally made contact, his fingers gentle against my cheek. "Because you saw me at my weakest, when I was nothing but a dying animal in the snow, and you chose kindness. Because every day for 2 years, I watched you survive alone and never lose that gentle heart. Even when the world gave you every reason to become hard and bitter." He paused, his thumb tracing my cheekbone with infinite care. "Because you're mine, Elena, my conscience, my redemption. And whether you accept that or not, I will protect you until my last breath." A sound from across the room broke the spell. Sarah clearing her throat meaningfully. "As touching as this is, we still have practical matters to address. The council will demand an explanation, and we need to prepare for the political fallout." Dane rose to his feet, though his eyes remained on me for a long moment before he turned to face Sarah. "Call the council for tomorrow night. That gives us time to settle Elena in and prepare our arguments." "And what exactly are you going to tell them?" Garrett asked. "That you've claimed a human under pack protection?" "If necessary." Dane's tone brooked no argument. Beth, who had remained quiet throughout the exchange, stepped forward. "She'll need proper quarters and clothes. Something warm. Winter's coming early this year. Put her in the guest wing of my lodge," Dane said. "I want her close." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "That's going to fuel speculation." "Let it." Dane's golden eyes were hard now. "All alpha. Make it clear that anyone who threatens or harms her answers to me personally." I watched this exchange feeling increasingly like a piece on a game board being moved without consultation. "Don't I get a say in this?" I asked, my voice sharper than intended. Everyone turned to look at me. Dane's expression softened. "Of course. What would you like?" "I'd like to understand what's happening. What it means that I'm here. What the council is. What—" I gestured helplessly. "All of this. I went from living alone in a cabin to being under the protection of an Alpha King in the span of a few hours. And I feel like I'm drowning." Dane exchanged a look with Sarah, then nodded. "You're right. I'm sorry. I'm used to making decisions quickly, without explanation. Let me start over." He pulled another chair close to mine and sat, his body angled toward me. "The council is made up of representatives from each of the packs under my authority. They advise me on major decisions and help maintain order across the territories. Bringing a human into our midst violates several long-standing traditions and raises questions about secrecy, safety, and integration. They're going to hate me, I said flatly. Some will, he admitted. Others will be curious. A few might even support you, especially once they hear the full story. But regardless of their opinions, you're here under my direct protection, which means you're untouchable. No one can harm you without facing me. And if they decide I'm not worth the trouble, if they demand you send me away, his jaw clenched, then they can demand all they want. I'm the Alpha King, Elena. My word is law. But at what cost? I pressed. If protecting me undermines your authority or causes division in your pack, then that's my choice to make. He leaned forward, his intensity almost overwhelming. You saved my life when you had nothing to gain and everything to lose. I'm offering you the same choice now. Protection, belonging, a place where your compassion is valued instead of punished. Whether you accept it or not is up to you. But don't reject it out of some misguided attempt to protect me from the consequences. I'm a king, Elena. I can handle my counsel. I looked into his golden eyes and saw the truth there. He meant every word. And more than that, I saw the same loneliness I'd carried for 2 years, reflected back at me. He understood what it was like to be set apart, to carry burdens alone. Okay, I said softly. I'll stay, at least until we figure this out. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after a storm. Good. That's good. Beth approached with a fresh cup of something warm and fragrant. Here, drink this. It'll help with the shock and the cold. I accepted it gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. The liquid tasted of honey and herbs, soothing as it went down. Around me, the pack members began to move again, their earlier tension easing as they returned to their tasks. But I caught the glances they sent my way, the whispered conversations, the human girl, the one the Alpha King saved, the one he's protecting. What I was to Dane, Sarah had said. Looking at him now, seeing the way his eyes tracked my every movement with protective intensity, I began to understand what she meant, and it terrified me. The guest wing of Dane's lodge was far more luxurious than anything I'd ever experienced. Beth had led me there after the council discussion, chattering nervously about pack dynamics and territorial politics, while I tried to absorb even a fraction of the information. The room she showed me to had a massive bed piled with furs, a stone fireplace already crackling with warmth, and windows that overlooked the valley below. There's a bathing room through that door, Beth said, pointing to a carved wooden door on the far wall. Hot water comes from the springs beneath the mountain, one of the perks of living in shifter territory. And I'll bring you some clothes in the morning. You're taller than me, but Sarah probably has things that will fit. Thank you, I said, setting my sodden bag on a chair. You've been very kind. She smiled, but there was uncertainty in her eyes. Can I ask you something? About that night 2 years ago? I tensed but nodded. Were you afraid? When you found Dane in the trap? The memory surfaced clearly. The blood, the golden eyes watching me with that impossible intelligence, the very real possibility that the wolf might kill me the moment I freed him. Terrified, I admitted. But he was suffering, and I couldn't just walk away from that. Beth's expression turned thoughtful. Most humans would have. Most would have seen a dangerous predator, and nothing else. She moved toward the door, then paused. I'm glad you didn't. Dane's been different since that night. Quieter, more human, somehow. I think you reminded him of something he'd forgotten. She left before I could ask what she meant, closing the door softly behind her. I stood in the middle of the opulent room, suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what had happened. This morning I'd been alone in my cabin, resigned to isolation. Now I was in the heart of a shifter pack, under the protection of their king, surrounded by people who could transform into wolves. The hot bath helped. I scrubbed away 2 years of grime and fear, letting the heated water soak into muscles I hadn't realized were so tense. When I finally emerged, wrapped in a thick robe I'd found hanging on the door, I felt almost human again. A knock at the door made me freeze. Elena? It's Dane. May I come in? My heart immediately began to race. Just a moment. I tightened the robe's belt and ran my fingers through my damp blonde hair, trying to make myself presentable. When I opened the door, he was standing in the hallway with a tray of food, bread, cheese, some kind of roasted meat, and a clay pitcher that smelled of wine. "I thought you might be hungry," he said. "You haven't eaten since this morning." The smell of the food made my stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. "I am, thank you." He entered the room, and I was struck again by his sheer presence. He'd changed clothes, no longer the rain-soaked warrior, but dressed in simple dark trousers and a loose shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful build beneath. He set the tray on a small table near the fire and gestured for me to sit. We ate in silence for a few minutes, and I tried not to devour the food like a starving animal. The bread was fresh and warm, the cheese sharp and creamy, the meat seasoned with herbs I couldn't identify. It was the best meal I'd had in 2 years. "Better?" Dane asked, watching me with something like amusement. "Much." I took a sip of the wine, which was rich and smooth. "Thank you. For all of this. The room, the food, I gestured vaguely. "Everything. You don't need to thank me, Elena. This is the least I can do." He leaned back in his chair, his golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "I want to explain something to you about what happens tomorrow with the council." I set down my wine cup, suddenly anxious again. "All right." There are 7 council members, each representing a different pack in the Northern Territories. Some are old allies, people I've known for decades. Others are newer, more conservative in their thinking. They're going to have questions about how you discovered our existence, about your intentions here, about the threat you might pose to our secrecy. "I would never tell anyone," I said immediately. "Who would I even tell? The village that wanted to burn me?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "I know that, but they don't. Not yet. They'll need to be convinced that you can be trusted, that you understand the gravity of what you know." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "They may also question my judgment in bringing you here. Some will see it as a weakness, an alpha allowing emotion to override logic. Is that what they think? That you're being emotional?" His eyes met mine, intense and unwavering. "I am being emotional, Elena. I haven't been able to think clearly about you since the night you saved me. Every logical argument for keeping my distance, for maintaining the boundaries between our kinds. None of it matters when I think about you facing that mob alone." My breath caught. "Dane." "I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just need you to understand that tomorrow might be difficult. Some council members may be harsh in their questioning. They may say things about you, about us, that are meant to provoke or intimidate. I need you to stay calm, to answer honestly, and to trust that I won't let them hurt you. You keep saying that you'll protect me. But what if protecting me costs you everything? What if the council refuses to accept me, and you have to choose between your pack and whatever this is?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft. "Do you know what it's like to carry the weight of hundreds of lives? To make every decision with the knowledge that people depend on you for their safety, their prosperity, their very survival?" "No," I admitted. "It's suffocating. Every day is a balance between what's best for the pack and what's politically expedient. Every choice has consequences that ripple outward in ways I can't always predict." He looked at me then, and the vulnerability in his expression made my chest ache. "And then you appeared in that clearing. This slight human girl with gentle hands and a brave heart. And for the first time in my life, someone saw past the alpha, past the king, past all the responsibilities and expectations. You saw a creature in pain and chose kindness. I just did what anyone should do," I whispered. "But they don't." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "That's the point, Elena. Most people don't choose compassion when it costs them something. They choose self-preservation, safety. But you," he shook his head, almost in wonder. "You chose to help, knowing it might destroy you. And it did destroy your old life, didn't it? The village, your home, everything you knew." I couldn't deny it. "Yes." "Then let me give you something better, a new life, a new home. People who will value what you are instead of fearing it." His hand reached out, hovering near mine but not quite touching. "Stay, Elena. Not just until we figure this out, but truly stay. Let me show you what it means to belong." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with promise and possibility. I looked at his hand, so close to mine, and remembered the wolf in the snow, the way he'd touched his nose to my palm in gratitude before limping away. That same gentleness was in him now. This powerful king making himself vulnerable before me. "What if I don't fit in?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "What if the pack never accepts me? What if I'm always just the human girl, the outsider? Then we'll deal with it together." His fingers finally made contact, lacing through mine with careful deliberation. "You won't be alone anymore, Elena. I promise you that." The warmth of his touch spread through me, chasing away the chill that had lived in my bones for 2 years. I wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this place, these people, could become home. But trust was a muscle I'd forgotten how to use. "I'm scared," I admitted in a whisper. "So am I." His thumb traced circles on the back of my hand. "Terrified, actually, of what it means that I can't let you go. Of what the council might demand tomorrow. Of all the ways this could go wrong." He paused, his golden eyes searching mine. "But I'm more afraid of going back to the way things were. Watching you from the shadows, keeping my distance, pretending you don't matter. I can't do that anymore." A log shifted in the fireplace, sending up a shower of sparks. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the pack settling in for the night. Voices calling goodnight, doors closing, the comfortable sounds of community. It was so different from the silence I'd grown accustomed to. "Tell me about them," I said, needing to redirect the intensity of the moment. "The council members." "Who should I be worried about?" Dane seemed to understand my need for distance and sat back, though he didn't release my hand. "Marcus is the oldest. He's been alive for nearly 2 centuries, and remembers when humans hunted us almost to extinction. He'll be the most suspicious of you. But he's also honorable. If you can prove yourself trustworthy, he'll defend you to his dying breath." 2 centuries? I couldn't hide my shock. Shifters live longer than humans. "It's one of many differences you'll discover," he continued before I could process that. "Then there's Olivia. She leads the Western Pack and is fiercely protective of our secrecy. She'll question your presence extensively, but she's also pragmatic. Show her that keeping you close is safer than letting you go, and she might become an ally." He went through the other council members. Thomas, who was young and idealistic. Vera, who prized tradition above all else. Jonathan, who cared only about pack strength. Samuel, who was Dane's oldest friend and would support him regardless. And finally Nadia, who was unpredictable but respected Dane's judgment. So basically, I need to convince a group of ancient, powerful shifters that I'm not a threat while also proving I'm worth protecting, I summarized. Essentially, yes. He smiled, but it was strained. "No pressure," I laughed, the sound surprising both of us. "Well, I've survived this long on my own. How much harder can it be to survive a council meeting?" His expression grew somber. "Elena, I need you to understand something. If this goes badly tomorrow, if the council demands something I can't give, there may be consequences, political upheaval, challenges to my authority, even..." He hesitated. "Even violence. I need to know that you're prepared for that possibility. Are you saying I should leave? That I should run before it gets to that point?" "No." The word was fierce. "I'm saying that if it comes to it, I'll choose you, and I need you to be ready for what that choice might cost." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy cloak. This man, this alpha king, was willing to risk everything for me. A human girl he barely knew. The realization was both humbling and terrifying. "I don't understand why," I said quietly. "Why I'm worth that much to you." He stood then, pulling me up with him, his hands framing my face with infinite gentleness. "Because you reminded me what it means to be more than just an alpha, more than just a king. You reminded me how to be human." His forehead touched mine, his breath warm against my lips. "And because when I look at you, I see the future I've been too afraid to hope for. One where strength and gentleness aren't opposites, where power and compassion can coexist." My hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath my palms. "Dane, I'm not asking for your answer now," he murmured. "I know it's too soon, too much. But I needed you to know. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever the council decides, you matter to me. More than politics, more than tradition, more than any treaty or rule or law." He pulled back slightly, his golden eyes searching mine in the firelight. For a moment, I thought he might kiss me, and my heart stuttered in anticipation. But instead, he pressed his lips to my forehead, a gesture so tender it made my throat tight with emotion. "Sleep well, Elena," he said softly. "Tomorrow we face the council, and I promise you, you won't face them alone." He left then, closing the door quietly behind him. I stood in the middle of the room, my fingers touching the place where his lips had been, my mind spinning with everything that had happened. Outside, the moon was rising over the valley, painting everything in silver light. I moved to the window and looked out at the pack village below. Lights glowed in windows, smoke rose from chimneys, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. A sound of belonging, of home. For the first time in 2 years, I felt something other than resignation or fear. I felt hope. Fragile and uncertain, but undeniably real. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The council would test me, question me, perhaps even threaten me. But I wouldn't face it alone. I had Dane's protection, his promise, and, if I was brave enough to reach for it, perhaps something even more precious. A chance at belonging. The council chamber was carved directly into the mountain, a vast circular room with a domed ceiling that seemed to absorb and amplify every sound. 7 chairs arranged in a semicircle faced a single seat where I sat, feeling like prey surrounded by predators. Torches lined the walls, their flickering light casting dancing shadows that made the stone seem alive. Dane stood behind me, his presence a solid anchor at my back. I could feel the controlled power radiating from him, the barely leashed dominance of an alpha who was allowing his counsel to question, but would tolerate no true threat. Sarah and Garrett flanked the entrance, their expressions carefully neutral. The council members were exactly as intimidating as I'd feared. Marcus, ancient and silver-haired, watched me with eyes that had seen centuries of human cruelty. Olivia's sharp features were set in an expression of cool assessment. The others ranged from openly hostile to cautiously curious, but all of them radiated power that made my skin prickle with awareness. "Let us begin," Marcus said, his voice carrying the weight of his years. "Elena of... Where exactly do you hail from, girl?" "Millbrook," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "The village in the valley below the southern ridge." "Millbrook." Olivia leaned forward, her dark eyes glinting. "The same village that attempted to execute you for witchcraft yesterday. How convenient that you fled straight to our Alpha King's protection." The implication was clear, that I had somehow manipulated the situation, used Dane for my own gain. I felt him tense behind me, but before he could speak, I responded. I didn't know where Dane was taking me until we arrived. I only knew that staying in my cabin meant death, and he offered an alternative. I met Olivia's gaze directly. "I'm not here because I sought out shifters. I'm here because your king chose to honor a debt he felt he owed." "A debt," Vera said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "For tending to wounds any healer could have managed. Hardly seems worth compromising our entire existence." "Any healer could have managed the physical wounds," I agreed. "But how many would have freed a wolf from a hunter's trap, while that wolf was still conscious and capable of killing them? How many would have worked for over an hour in the snow, alone and vulnerable, to save a creature they'd been taught to fear?" I paused, letting the question hang. I didn't help Dane because I expected gratitude or reward. I helped him because he was suffering, and I couldn't walk away from that. "Pretty words," Thomas said, though his tone was less hostile than the others. "But actions speak louder. What proof do we have that you won't return to your village and expose our location? What guarantee that you won't lead hunters here the moment you're released?" "I have nowhere to return to," I said quietly. "The people I grew up with decided I was worth burning. They would have done it too, if Dane hadn't intervened. As for guarantees," I spread my hands, "I can't offer any beyond my word. But consider this. If I wanted to harm shifters, I had the perfect opportunity 2 years ago. I could have left Dane to die in that trap, or reported his location to the hunters. Instead, I saved him and kept his secret, even when it cost me everything I had." Marcus studied me with those ancient eyes. "You claim you kept our secret. Yet here you sit, alive and well, while those who accused you are dead or fled. How do we know you didn't orchestrate this entire scenario? The accusation was so absurd it almost made me laugh. With respect, council member, if I had the power to orchestrate anything, I wouldn't have spent 2 years living alone in a cabin, barely surviving. I would have used that power to defend myself from the accusations in the first place. She has a point, Samuel said, speaking for the first time. He was younger than Marcus, but carried himself with quiet authority. The girl we've been watching for 2 years has been anything but powerful. She's been isolated, vulnerable, barely scraping by. That's not the behavior of someone plotting against us. You've been watching me? I turned to look at Dane, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. We had to ensure you weren't a threat, he said, and to make sure you were safe. Nadia, who had been silent until now, leaned forward with interest. Tell me, Elena, in those 2 years of isolation, did you never once consider revealing what you knew? Trading information about the wolf you'd saved for acceptance back into your community? The question cut deeper than any accusation of manipulation. Every day, I admitted, and felt Dane stiffen behind me. Every single day I thought about it. About what I could say, what I could trade for my old life back. I took a breath, steadying myself. But every time I considered it, I remembered those golden eyes looking at me with trust, with gratitude. I remembered that I had made a choice to help, and that choice meant something. I couldn't betray that, even when I had nothing left. Silence fell over the chamber. I could see the council members exchanging glances, some skeptical, others thoughtful. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. The real question, Jonathan said, his voice rough, is what we do with her now. She knows about us, knows our location, knows our nature. We can't simply let her leave. I agree, Olivia said. But keeping her here indefinitely creates its own problems. She's human. She'll age and die while we remain. She'll become a liability, a weakness that our enemies could exploit. Unless we turn her, Vera suggested, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Make her one of us. Then she would be bound by pack law and loyalty. I felt Dane's hand on my shoulder. A warning and a comfort simultaneously. Turning a human against their will is forbidden by our oldest laws, he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. Elena will remain human unless she chooses otherwise, and that choice, if it ever comes, will be hers alone. So we're simply to accept a human living among us? Marcus asked, setting aside centuries of tradition and secrecy for one girl? Not just any girl. Dane moved to stand beside me, and I saw the shift in his posture, from protective guardian to commanding alpha. The girl who saved my life, the girl who kept our secret even when it cost her everything, the girl who has shown more honor and compassion than many shifters I've known. His golden eyes swept across the council. Yes, I'm asking you to accept her, not because she's human, but because she's earned a place here through her actions and her character. And if we refuse? Olivia asked, though her tone had lost some of its edge. Then you refuse me. Dane's voice was quiet, but carried an unmistakable threat. Elena is under my direct protection. Any vote to exile her is a vote of no confidence in my leadership. If you cannot trust my judgment in this, then perhaps you should choose a new Alpha King. The chamber erupted. Several council members spoke at once, their voices rising in protest or support. I sat frozen, stunned by what Dane had just done. He had essentially threatened to abdicate if they rejected me. The risk, the sheer magnitude of what he was willing to sacrifice. It was overwhelming. Marcus raised his hand, and the room fell silent. You would truly step down over this human girl? Risk everything we've built, all the alliances and treaties for someone you've known for less than a day? I've known her for 2 years, Dane corrected. I've watched her survive alone, watched her maintain her kindness, despite having every reason to become bitter. And yes, if protecting her means stepping down, then I'll do it, because a leadership that requires me to abandon honor and compassion is not a leadership worth having. The old shifter studied Dane for a long moment, then turned his gaze to me. Stand up, girl. I rose on shaking legs, feeling the weight of 7 pairs of eyes assessing me. Marcus approached, moving with a grace that belied his apparent age. He circled me slowly, and I forced myself to remain still, to meet his gaze when it fixed on mine. "You're afraid," he observed. "Yes," I admitted. "I would be a fool not to be. Yet you don't run. Don't beg. Don't try to make yourself smaller or more palatable." A hint of approval entered his expression. "You stand here and face us, knowing we could kill you with a thought. That takes courage." "Or stupidity," I said, then immediately regretted it when several council members made sounds of surprise. But Marcus laughed, a genuine warm sound that transformed his entire face. "Or stupidity," he agreed. "Though I suspect in your case it's courage." He looked back at Dane. "She saved your life. Has she asked for anything in return?" "No," Dane said. "Nothing." "And you're willing to risk your position to protect her?" "I am." Marcus nodded slowly, then turned to address the full council. "I've lived for nearly 200 years. I've seen humans at their worst, hunting us, killing us, destroying our homes and families. But I've also seen them at their best. And this girl," he gestured to me, "she represents that best. The capacity for compassion, for sacrifice, for choosing what's right over what's easy. If we reject her, we reject the very qualities we claim to value in our own people." "Are you suggesting we accept her?" Vera asked, incredulous. "I'm suggesting we honor the debt our king owes her. She saved his life. She's earned pack protection, at minimum." Marcus looked at me again. "But that protection comes with conditions, girl. You'll need to learn our ways, respect our laws, and prove yourself worthy of the trust we're placing in you. Can you do that?" "I can," I said, my voice stronger now. "I will." "Then I vote to grant her sanctuary under pack law, with a probationary period of 1 year. During that time, she'll be monitored, taught, and assessed. At the end of the year, we'll reconvene to determine her permanent status." One by one, the other council members cast their votes. Samuel voted in favor immediately. Thomas followed, then Nadia. Jonathan abstained, clearly uncomfortable with the entire situation. Olivia was next, and after a long pause, she nodded her assent. Vera voted against, her expression sour. It came down to Olivia's second, a quiet woman named Helena, who had observed more than spoken. Everyone turned to her, waiting. "The girl saved our king," Helena said finally. "That alone warrants our protection. I vote in favor." The tension in the room released like a snapped bowstring. I felt my knees go weak with relief, and Dane's hand steadied me immediately. He was smiling, actually smiling, with a joy that transformed his entire face. "Thank you," I managed to say to the council. "I won't make you regret this." "See that you don't," Marcus said, but his tone was almost kind. "Welcome to Thornridge, Elena. May you find the belonging here that you lost elsewhere." The council members filed out, some pausing to nod at Dane or cast curious glances my way. When the chamber was finally empty except for Dane, Sarah, Garrett, and myself, I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That was... I couldn't find words. "Intense," Sarah supplied. "But you handled it well. Marcus doesn't give approval lightly." "I thought I was going to pass out," I admitted. Dane turned me to face him, his hands gentle on my shoulders. "You were magnificent. Strong and honest and brave. Everything I knew you were. You risked everything," I whispered. "Your position, your authority, and I'd do it again." His thumb traced my cheek. "Some things are worth the risk, Elena. You're worth the risk." The weeks that followed passed in a blur of discovery and adjustment. Beth took me under her wing, teaching me about pack dynamics and shifter customs. I learned that the pack was a family in the truest sense, bound by loyalty and love rather than just biology. I watched them shift and run together under the full moon, their joy and freedom so pure it made my chest ache. Dane was patient, giving me space to adjust while remaining a constant, steady presence. We fell into a routine, breakfast together, where he'd tell me about pack business and I'd share what I'd learned, walks in the forest, where he'd point out landmarks and tell me stories of his childhood, quiet evenings by the fire, reading, or simply talking. The silences between us growing increasingly comfortable. I began to heal in ways I hadn't realized I needed. The isolation of the past 2 years had left scars deeper than I'd acknowledged, but here, surrounded by acceptance and belonging, those scars began to fade. I laughed more, smiled more, started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserved this happiness. Winter came in full force, blanketing the valley in snow. The pack celebrated the solstice with a great feast, and I found myself in the center of it all. No longer an outsider, but a member of the community. Children played at my feet, adults included me in their conversations, and everywhere I went, I felt the warmth of acceptance. On the night of the winter solstice, as the pack gathered around a massive bonfire, Dane found me standing at the edge of the celebration. The flames cast his face in gold and shadow, making his features seem almost otherworldly. "Happy?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, and realized I meant it completely. I never thought I could be this happy again. "You deserve it, Elena. You deserve all of this and more." He took my hand, lacing our fingers together with a familiarity that had become natural over the past months. "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped. "What?" "The probationary year is almost over. In 2 weeks, the council will meet again to determine your permanent status." He turned to face me fully, his golden eyes serious. "But before that happens, I want to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." "All right. Do you want to stay? Not because you have nowhere else to go, not because you feel obligated, but because this is truly where you want to be?" I looked around at the gathered pack, at Beth teaching a young girl to dance, at Garrett laughing with Marcus, at Sarah directing the festivities with good-natured bossiness. I looked at the snow-covered valley, the warm lodges, the life I'd built here over the past months. And I looked at Dane, this powerful alpha king who had chosen to save me, to protect me, to show me what belonging truly meant. "Yes," I said softly. "I want to stay. This is home now." The smile that broke across his face was pure sunshine. "Then there's something else I need to ask." He took both my hands now, his expression turning serious. "The council will likely approve your permanent residency, but there's a way to make your position here absolutely unquestionable. A way to bind you to the pack in a manner that no one could dispute." My breath caught. "What way?" "You could accept a mate bond, with me." The words came out in a rush, as if he'd been holding them back for too long. "I know it's fast. I know you might not feel the same way I do, but Elena, I love you. I've loved you since the night you chose compassion over fear, and if you'll have me, if you'll accept this bond, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life making you happy." Tears blurred my vision. "Dane, you don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Take time, think about it. Yes." He froze. "Yes, yes, I'll accept the bond. Yes, I love you too. Yes to all of it." I laughed through my tears. "How could I not? You've shown me what it means to be valued, to be protected, to be loved for exactly who I am. You've given me a home, a family, a future I never dared to dream of." He pulled me into his arms, holding me so tightly I could barely breathe, and I didn't care. His face buried in my hair, and I felt his whole body shaking with emotion. "I'll be a good mate to you," he whispered against my temple. "I swear it." "I know you will." I pulled back enough to see his face, to trace the strong features I'd come to know so well. "And I'll be worthy of you, of all of this. You already are." He leaned down, and finally, his lips met mine in a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. The pack around us erupted in cheers and howls of approval, but I barely heard them. All I knew was the warmth of Dane's arms, the sweetness of his kiss, and the absolute certainty that I was exactly where I was meant to be. 2 weeks later, the council convened as promised, but instead of a probationary review, they witnessed a mating ceremony. Dane and I stood before them, our hands bound together with silver cord, and pledged ourselves to each other before the pack and the moon. Marcus performed the ceremony, his ancient voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "From this day forward, Elena is not merely pack. She is Luna, mate to our Alpha King, Her protection is our protection. Her enemies are our enemies. Her joy is our joy. The pack howled their approval, the sound echoing across the valley and into the mountains beyond. And as Dane pulled me close, as I felt the mate bond settle into place like a golden thread connecting our hearts, I finally understood what I'd been searching for all along. Not just acceptance, not just protection, but love. Pure, unconditional, transformative love. I had saved a dying wolf in the snow, choosing compassion over fear. And in return, that wolf had saved me, not just from fire and death, but from loneliness and despair. He'd shown me that my gentle heart wasn't a weakness, but a strength. That my capacity for compassion was a gift to be celebrated, not punished. As spring arrived and the valley bloomed with new life, I stood beside my mate and looked out over our pack, our family. Children played in the sunshine, adults worked together to prepare for the coming year. And everywhere, there was laughter and joy, and the simple beauty of belonging. I was no longer the invisible girl from Millbrook. I was Elena Thornridge, Luna of the Northern Packs, mate to the Alpha King, and I was finally, completely, perfectly home.